The golden sun had just begun to rise over the vast African savanna. A soft breeze stirred the tall grass, and the sounds of awakening life echoed through the wilderness. Birds sang, insects hummed, and far in the distance, the deep rumble of an elephant's call rolled across the plains. Near a patch of acacia trees, two tiny lion cubs crouched beside a large rock, their bodies trembling. Their fur was matted with dust, and their round amber eyes were wide with fear and confusion. The morning was quiet, too quiet for them. Their mother, the fierce lioness Nala, had been their protector, their world, but now she lay several miles away, hidden in a dry riverbed, badly injured after a brutal encounter the night before. The cubs had witnessed it all, the chaos, the roars, the thunder of gunfire. Rangers had been chasing poachers through the area, and in the confusion, the mother lioness had tried to protect her cubs from a stampede of frightened animals. She had been hit by a stray bullet meant for something else. Wounded and weak, she had managed to crawl away, leaving her cubs temporarily hidden. But by dawn, when the cubs came searching for her, they found only her scent and drops of blood leading toward the riverbed. They were too young to understand pain the way adults do, but they knew fear, and in their tiny hearts, an instinct told them they had to find help. For miles they wandered, calling out faint mews that barely rose above the wind. Their voices were small against the vastness of the savanna. Birds swooped overhead, watching them curiously. A pair of jackals followed at a distance, their eyes glinting hungrily. The cubs could feel the danger closing in. As the sun climbed higher, the heat grew unbearable. The smaller cub, Kavu, stumbled and whimpered. His sister, Emara, nudged him gently with her nose. She was only slightly older but more determined. "Come on," she seemed to whisper with her eyes. "We have to keep moving." They followed the smell of water until they reached a dried-up watering hole. Nearby, they heard a low, deep rumble, the sound of something enormous moving through the trees. They froze. Through the haze of heat, a shadow appeared, growing larger with every step. It was an elephant, a massive bull named Tembo. His tusks were long and curved, his skin marked with scars from many seasons of survival. He was old, wise, and solitary, preferring peace over conflict. The cubs had never seen such a creature up close before. To them, he looked like a mountain come alive. Amara took a hesitant step forward, mewing softly. Tembo stopped, his huge ears fanning out as he turned his massive head. He blinked slowly, lowering his trunk toward the ground. The cubs could smell the moisture on his skin and the dust of the earth. At first, Tembo thought they were playing, but when he saw the desperation in their eyes, something stirred deep within him. He reached his trunk toward them, and Kovu flinched, hiding behind his sister. Tembo rumbled softly, a sound like distant thunder but filled with warmth. "What are you doing here, little ones?" he murmured, his voice deep but kind. The cubs couldn't answer with words, but their actions spoke clearly. They mewed, circled him, and tugged weakly at his trunk, trying to pull him toward the riverbed. Tembo watched them for a moment, then sniffed the air. There it was, the faint scent of blood and lioness. His eyes narrowed with concern. He understood now. He began to follow the scent, walking slowly so the cubs could keep up. They trotted beside him, their tiny paws sinking into the sand. For the first time since morning, hope glimmered in their eyes. The journey was long. Tembo had to push through thick brush, using his tusks to clear paths. He shielded the cubs from vultures that swooped too close and frightened away hyenas lurking in the shadows. Each step he took felt heavier, but his heart told him he was doing something that mattered, something bigger than himself. By late afternoon, they reached the edge of the dry riverbed. The air was still, heavy with the scent of decay and dust. There, under a twisted tree, lay the lioness. Tembo stopped. The cubs ran forward, crying out. Their mother lifted her head weakly, her golden eyes flickering open. She tried to stand, but her hind leg was mangled, and blood had dried on her side. She let out a low rumble, half a growl, half a sigh of relief. Her babies were alive. Tembo's great heart ached at the sight. He lowered himself slowly, trunk reaching out to gently brush dust from her side. The lioness didn't flinch. She was too weak to fight, too tired to fear. But Tembo knew what she needed: water, shade, and safety. He looked around, his sharp eyes spotting a distant glimmer of green, a small pond deep within the trees. It was far, but not unreachable. He turned back to her. "Hold on," he whispered, though she could not understand his words. "I'll get help." The cubs followed him, but Tembo stopped them with his trunk. He trumpeted softly, a command, "Stay with her." Then, with a deep breath, he began his slow march across the plains. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows, Tembo's massive frame appeared like a moving mountain against the horizon. He wasn't just walking for them, he was walking for life itself. Hours passed. The lioness drifted in and out of consciousness. Her cubs pressed close to her for warmth. The world grew quiet except for the chirping of crickets and the distant roar of thunder. Then faintly, the sound of an engine echoed across the valley. A jeep rolled slowly through the grass, its headlights cutting through the dim light. Inside sat Ranger David, a seasoned protector of the park. He had been following a herd of elephants earlier, but now stopped when he heard a loud trumpet, urgent, distressed. He looked ahead and saw Tembo standing in the middle of the trail. His massive ears flared, blocking the road. David slowed to a stop, confused. The elephant wasn't aggressive he seemed to be. Waiting, David stepped out cautiously, rifle slung on his shoulder but not raised. "Easy, boy," he said softly. "What's wrong?" Tembo trumpeted again, pointing his trunk toward the distance, then took a few steps, pausing as if to say, "Follow me." David hesitated, but something about the elephant's eyes, that pleading, intelligent gaze, made him climb back into the jeep and drive behind him. The journey was surreal. Tembo led, moving with surprising speed for his size. They crossed shallow gullies, dry grasses, and patches of thorn. Finally, they reached the riverbed. David stopped when he saw the scene before him. Two tiny lion cubs were curled beside their injured mother, who could barely lift her head. His heart sank. Oh no! He grabbed his medical kit and slowly approached, keeping a careful distance. The mother lioness growled weakly, her body trembling. Tembo stood beside her, as if telling her, "He's here to help." David crouched and looked at the wound, a clean bullet entry, deep but not instantly fatal. "This must have been from that chase yesterday," he muttered. He'd heard reports of poachers firing in the area. "You poor thing." He worked quickly, pouring antiseptic, cleaning the wound and bandaging it as best as he could. The cubs cried softly, confused and frightened by the smell of humans and medicine. As David worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that the elephant somehow knew what was happening, that he'd brought him here on purpose. When he glanced up, Tembo stood silent, watching, his trunk occasionally brushing the cubs as if comforting them. Night fell. David built a small fire a few meters away to keep predators at bay. He radioed his base for help, but the signal was weak. "I'll stay till morning," he told himself. The cubs huddled close to their mother, who now rested quietly, breathing easier. Tembo stood guard, his massive shadow cast by the firelight. Every once in a while he'd rumble softly, a lullaby of the wild. David couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire, staring at the silhouette of the elephant against the starry sky. "You did this, didn't you?" he whispered. "You saved them." By dawn, the rescue team arrived. They sedated the lioness and carefully loaded her onto a stretcher. The cubs resisted, mewing frantically, but David gently picked them up and placed them beside her. As the jeep drove away, Tembo followed for a few steps, then stopped. He lifted his trunk high and trumpeted a farewell that echoed across the plains. The cubs turned, pressing their tiny paws against the bars of the crate, watching their savior grow smaller in the distance. Weeks passed. The lioness recovered slowly at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. Her wound healed, and she began to regain her strength. The cubs grew playful again, though they often looked toward the horizon, as if waiting for someone. Ranger David visited them daily. He'd often find himself telling the story to the staff, how an elephant led him to an injured lioness. No one believed it at first, but the sincerity in his voice and the emotion in his eyes silenced every doubt. One morning, when the sun painted the sky in gold and rose, it was time to release them back into the wild. The cage door opened, and the lioness stepped out, her cubs by her side. She looked around, sniffing the air, familiar scents, familiar wind. But then, faintly in the distance, came a sound deep, resonant, like rolling thunder, a trumpet. The lioness froze. The cubs perked up instantly, tails twitching, and there, on the far edge of the savannah, stood Tembo. He was older now, slower perhaps, but unmistakably proud. The lioness began to walk toward him, slowly, cautiously. The cubs ran ahead, leaping, mewing excitedly. Tembo lowered his trunk, letting them brush against it, rumbling softly in greeting. Ranger David watched from afar, a smile tugging at his lips. "You found your friend," he whispered. The moment was pure, a bond beyond species, beyond instinct. A reminder that the wild, though often harsh, still holds compassion in its heart. For a while, the lioness and the elephant stood together in silence, the cubs circling around them like rays of life. Then, as if understanding that this was goodbye, Tembo raised his trunk high and let out one long, echoing call. The lioness answered with a roar soft, but full of gratitude. Then she turned and walked away with her cubs, disappearing into the tall grass. Tembo watched them go until they were only specks in the golden light. His eyes glistened. He had seen too much of life to cry, but his heart ached with the bittersweet weight of love and loss. Some say that in the nights that followed, Tembo would often wander to the same riverbed, standing beneath the stars, as if remembering the little cubs who once begged him for help. And when the wind blew softly, carrying the scent of lions across the plains, he would rumble a gentle song of memory, friendship, and the fragile beauty of life. And deep within that wilderness, the story lived on of how two lost lion cubs found hope in the heart of a giant, and how an old elephant proved that even in the wild, compassion is the most powerful force of all.